I really think that this whole notion, especially for Black women, this like strong, independent, resilient, can get through anything, doesn't need any help. Like, I feel like that is just starting to die out. Like, I'm here to have a soft life. Like, I'm not trying to be tough enough. I'm here to show up and be vulnerable. I'm here to be authentic with who I am. But I can't have up those walls that I used to have up because society said that's what I'm supposed to do. I need to be able to show up as imperfect and ask for help. Because society says that I don't deserve it doesn't mean I'm not going to ask for it, and doesn't mean I'm not going to demand it. Because things are not going to shift until I say, this is what we're doing now, and this is what I deserve, this is what I've earned.
The Grow Dialogue podcast is a liberation project that explores equity, inclusion, belonging, conflict resolution, and culture in the workplace and beyond, including in our personal relationships, families, and communities. Each week, my co-host, Maryella Marie, and I will bring you insightful guest interviews and artistic expressions curated to amplify emerging voices who are sharing practices that support society's transition to a more collaborative, just, sustainable, and liberating coexistence. We live during a time when divisiveness and polarization dominate the social, economic, and political discourse. In response to this reality, and empowered with the skills of authentic dialogue and systems thinking, I created an anti-oppression framework for social sustainability called Theory of Indivisibility to help illuminate a different path forward. Our hope is that these conversations and calls to action will ignite tolerance and empathy and provide guidance for our global listeners who want to actively engage in ending all forms of oppression while creating thriving relationships in the workplace and beyond. I'm Dr. Sundiata Soon-Jahta. Let's grow dialogue. Thank you for being here with me today, Noelle. I'm really excited to share your story and share your corporate journey along with your personal journey with the Grow Dialogue podcast audience. And to get started, I want to ask you a question, or the question of, who are you? How would you define yourself?
Okay, well, first, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation. So who am I? It's super multifaceted. I'm from the DC area, which definitely feels like home for me, but I live here out in Nashville. But at my core, I'm somebody who is dedicated to impacting change. I'm somebody who has been spending my entire career trying to find ways where people can feel like they can be their best selves, where they spend the most amount of time, which is at work. So a little bit of background about me. I spent most of my career working in operations, just kind of working in the background. With my background, always working in company culture, always seeing where there was some gaps. And I just kind of had this space where people could come to me with their problems. So I would notice things like microaggressions and things that were happening in the workplace, and I would make suggestions and do research and try to do little changes, which brought me into the DEI work that I was in, that I'm in now. But prior to that, I was working in ops for a pest control company, and the money was really good. I didn't have a degree. I was making great money anyway, and it just seemed like, all right, I can keep doing this. And I was somebody who really enjoyed complaining. That was my jam. I was the person that would have something to say about every customer that called through. It was fun for me. And when complaining became a part of my personality, I became really sick. I got a brain tumor. And with that brain tumor, the medication that it had me on, it made it very difficult for me to be able to speak. So for the first time, all that complaining that I was putting out, I couldn't even put it out. I had to be very, very thoughtful about the words that I was saying because speaking was so difficult. And it was the same with reading. I had to be really intentional about what I was going to read because reading was also difficult with me because of the medication I was on. Eventually I needed to have brain surgery and I felt all better, which is wonderful. But after that experience, I realized that I didn't want to spend my life just making a paycheck. I wanted to be able to make a difference. I don't like being somebody who's known for complaining all the time. So I started working for nonprofits, and I started, keeping that operational background, but like working in organizations where I felt like we're actually doing something. I've worked in companies that were shipping out human organs, and working in Medicare, and working in spaces that felt like it really did matter. This kind of brought me to a place where I realized that 70% of people didn't love their jobs. That's the statistics. 70% of people actually hate their jobs. So I started a interview company so I can help people get into roles where they can work in the companies that they really do like. And then I realized that wasn't the issue. It's the companies that need to change. So all of this really brought me into the DEI space where I am today, where I can help organization by organization make these tiny shifts. And it isn't just the way that they impact people on the inside, it's what they put outside. And these are like the ads that we're seeing and the products that are out there and the representation that we see. All of this really stems from having a really strong core when it comes to inclusion. So having any part of that, it means so much to me.
Wow, that's an amazing journey. And, it shows just how life can kind of take us through certain twists and turns to help us to get closer to, our purpose. So I appreciate that background and kind of a trajectory on how you moved into the diversity, equity, inclusion space. So I want to kind of go a little bit deeper into like who you are personally in terms of how you would define yourself beyond the person who is in DEI spaces. Who would you say Noelle is?
I'm a mother. I am somebody who enjoys adventure wherever I can find it. I enjoy empowering other people. So I kind of see myself as, always kind of walking into who my higher self is, which I've named the Empress. Like, what does the Empress need? What would she do? And like, that is ultimately who I'm always working towards. It's somebody who's at peace, and somebody who can impact other folks in a way that feels organic to who I am. So I feel like who I am is constantly shifting with what is going on in the world. But at my core, I'm a storyteller, I'm a mother, and I'm a change maker.
Awesome. Storyteller, mother, and change maker. So as a storyteller, can you share, is there a certain theme that you like to tell stories about particularly?
So when I'm doing my work, I talk a lot about anything where I can push myself under the bus, where I've made mistakes, to kind of show people that, we're all getting this together. We're all figuring out bias. So one of the stories that I tell folks is with thinking about like pausing before you have a difficult conversation with somebody, was a time that I was getting off of an airplane in Atlanta, and everybody was really pissed off. And there was an older white woman who was screaming at 3 Black flight attendants, and I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could see she was upset, and I could see that the flight attendants were frustrated. But the only thing I did hear was the older white woman say, "You know what? The only problem here is the 3 of them are Black." So I jumped in, I called the woman racist. I said what she's saying was unacceptable. Like, I was here to save the day. I put my cape on. And she goes, "No, my 3 Black bags are missing." And I was like, ooh, so like I share stories like that to kind of show like, listen, like this is the work that I do every day, and I'm making mistakes. So if I'm making mistakes, give yourself a little grace. It doesn't mean that we can't pivot and make things better, but sharing those kind of stories are important to me. I also really love to do, I write stories, and sometimes I'll share those open mics, and that's always fun too.
Okay. I love it. I love how you are able to, have a level of humility and not afraid to share that, you know, you can make mistakes. We all have blind spots. We all make assumptions,
Right.
you know, but through the unpacking and the communicating, we can, you know, continue to move forward, continue to evolve. None of us are finished. You know, that's kind of, you know, one of the
Exactly.
themes I'm getting from you, you know, right from the jump, in terms of you saying that you're ever evolving, you know, ever learning, ever growing and changing. And as we know, the only constant in this life, well, one of the only constants in this life is change.
Right.
So I appreciate that, and it definitely resonates. So I want to know, do you feel like, I want you to answer this question personally and professionally.
Okay.
So let's start personally. Do you feel like you have to wear a mask in your day-to-day life?
I wouldn't say that I need to wear a mask. I think that's something I used to do, but now I just don't have the patience for it, professionally or personally. I just don't. But I do know, in order to communicate with different groups, there may be some adjustments that I make, and it's all who I am. It's not something that's pretend, but like the way that I speak to my grandparents is going to be very different than the way that I talk to my best friends. The way I talk to my best friends is going to be different than when I'm working with an executive at Google. It is different, but I'm still bringing my organic self to these conversations. But the tone is going to be filtered in. It's still going to be me, where there's a lot of light in the work that I do, but with what I feel, where I feel the most comfort, it's going to shift. But I think that life is way too short to be wearing masks. I know a lot of folks are kind of forced to, but for me, I find that is so heavy. And not wearing a mask has been one of the things that have been, that people really recognize me for. Like, I'm starting to embrace being neurodivergent. And so when I share with, you know, somebody's reading me a paragraph that they saw online and they're like, hey, what do you think about this? I was like, hey, like, I actually can't process that. I need to read it, because when you're saying it out loud, I'm not able to catch everything that you're getting. And there was a time that I would have to put on this make believe, like, I think I caught every other word. Let me just summarize what I think that they said. I'm not doing that anymore. That's not fun for me. I'm struggling with this, and I'm going to let you know that this is, I'm challenged in this way. So I'm going to need a little bit of grace. And that's just been so freeing to me, to just be able to be transparent with people and saying what's comfortable for me, what isn't.
Whew. That's powerful. I love that. I love that, that slight difference in something that I think that we kind of, I've noticed in myself and I've noticed in others, like we have this tendency to want to, I don't know, just, I think it goes back to always wanting to be right and always showing up that, you know, we have to be like perfect and right and on par with everything. And it didn't always feel safe to say we didn't know something or we didn't understand something. Because I think, you know, when I think about that for myself, it reminds me of, you know, schooling. It's like in school, we got good grades for being right. You know, the whole idea was you had to be right. And I think in a lot of ways that I was raised as well, there was this expectation that I would, you know, present to the world with a level of excellence and what all that meant. And again, showing flaws just wasn't a part of, you know, the norm. Even if the flaws existed, we figured out ways to hide or mask them, you know, using that term, right? Mask, wearing a mask. Whereas what I hear you saying is that you've come into a place where you realize that, you know, you don't have to mask not knowing, because in reality, no one knows everything, right? That's why we need each other to complement one another. Where you're weak, I'm strong. Where I'm strong, you may be weaker, and we can complement each other. And, you know, basically what I hear is like just being able to show up in any different space as your full self, you know, showing your full humanity. And the example you just gave, and how your neurodivergence manifests, I think is a very powerful example. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I really think that this whole notion, especially for Black women, this like strong, independent, resilient, can get through anything, doesn't need any help. Like, I feel like that is just starting to die out. Like, I'm here to have a soft life. Like, I'm not trying to be tough enough. I'm here to show up and be vulnerable. I'm here to be authentic with who I am. But I can't have up those walls that I used to have up because society said that's what I'm supposed to do. I need to be able to show up as imperfect and ask for help. Because society says that I don't deserve it doesn't mean I'm not going to ask for it, and doesn't mean I'm not going to demand it. Because things are not going to shift until I say, this is what we're doing now, and this is what I deserve. This is what I've earned.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you have any other examples top of mind in ways that you feel like you may have used to wear a mask that you shifted away from?
So parties. I enjoy spending time with people. I'm an introvert, but you can really put me anywhere and I'll make a friend and it'll be fine. But I'm okay now with saying I'm ready to go, which is something I didn't used to be able to do. So for an example, went to a party where they had, they said it's a game night. I'm thinking we're gonna do Pictionary or categories or whatever. Like, I think that we're gonna do something more interactive. They wanna play like something that's like Dungeons and Dragons. And they start telling me all the rules. And I'm like, you know what? I'm good at a lot of things. I'm not good at this. So y'all have fun and I'm gonna leave. And there was no way that I would have done that before. I would have really felt forced to pretend that I'm having a really good time because I was invited and I needed to be grateful. And would this person still be my friend if I leave during this moment? Because it's hard as an adult to make friends. But being able to say like, actually, no, I'm not having any fun. Not only did I leave, but other people left too.
Okay.
Because it just wasn't going to be fun for everyone. And it's like, why pretend? Life is too short for that. So I think it's like just showing up and being like, this is what I'm able to do. This is what I like. This is where my zone of genius is versus where I'm excellent versus where I'm not competent. Like I'm going to just keep it, honest with y'all.
Right. And also a theme that I feel like I hear you saying, or what's coming up for me underlying everything you're saying, is that, even within our areas that we are not proficient, that doesn't take away from our genius. It doesn't take away from our ability to have a positive impact in the spaces that we're in. It doesn't take away from our ability to do the job, that we're called to do in a very effective way. We don't have to be perfect to show up and do those things. So, it's a very important message. And I like to go a little bit deeper around neurodivergence. Can you explain, if you're comfortable, because I think that, that's a term that has come into my awareness, I would say probably within the last 5 years or so.
Yeah.
It first came about. And I think that, and I've noticed that more and more people are embracing the areas where, they are neurodivergent. Can you lay any, or give us any context around like what that means to you and how you've discovered that about yourself?
Yeah. So being neurodivergent just, simply means that I'm not neurotypical, or I don't think the way that everybody else thinks. Cognitively, I'm different than other folks. So for me, I have dyscalculia, which is like dyslexia, but with numbers. But beyond that, it's being assigned to do a spreadsheet and like actually having a panic attack because I don't think that I'm going to be able to do it, and needing to figure out using lots of different tools in order to get anything that needs to be oriented with numbers done. But it also means having really hard time with time management, having to process details a lot differently, where I have to see the big picture and take things at a slower pace than maybe some other folks. And then also having ADHD. My son has ADHD. He also has tics that are in the neurodivergent kind of family. And I think that one of the things that we're seeing a lot of is because people are forced to be at home a lot, they're starting to get to know themselves a little bit better. And they're recognizing like, have I always struggled with this? And has this always been so challenging? Or I'm starting to talk to people online. A lot of people were finding out that they had ADHD through TikTok, which is like an app that they weren't going to spend time on, but because they're at home, they're kind of like forced to listen to other people's stories. And then when they hear, wait, I do that too, that's not normal. It really makes people need to investigate and maybe get some testing done. So that's just kind of, adding a little color to being neurodivergent to me.
Yeah. So is that how you found out? Did you find out later in life, like through social media, connecting with other people who explained that they, interact in the world in these ways or have certain struggles? Is that kind of how you came into this personal understanding?
Yeah, I definitely found out about it later in life, but I always knew that there was something that was wrong because I've always felt like I was very bright and I could test really well. Like I did excellent in my SATs, I would nail all of my tests, but school was so challenging for me. So much so that I wasn't able to complete college because I had to do something that was math or statistics oriented, and it would be so challenging for me. I just couldn't get it done. So before, I would see myself as this person that was not very smart, and maybe just like good at kind of like figuring things out and to squeak on by. But now I kind of see that person as someone who was incredibly innovative to be able to pull myself through high school, because that was so incredibly challenging, and not needing to repeat any classes or do any of that. Like it really was hard work, and like that's impressive, to not have the tools that people who get diagnosed as children end up having. I find that a lot of people, especially people of color, are resistant to get testing because of stigma, and it's incredibly freeing. So I was older when I found out about dyscalculia. I was like in maybe mid-20s. Okay. But ADHD, that's a newer revelation for me, because the traits of ADHD in women looks different than what we typically see as ADHD. Like I'm not somebody who's normally bouncing off the walls, but some things that I was associating with anxiety and what I was perceiving as laziness was actually ADHD.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I'm of the belief that everyone is I don't believe in typical. I really feel like, and I don't have any, data on this, but just from me observing the world and observing places and spaces and being really in tune to how people interact and move through the world. I really think that there's divergence, as I think divergence is the norm, if that makes sense in any way. Mm-hmm. I just think we all show up different ways for different reasons. And, I believe that through it all, we're designed to complement one another. Again, like I said before, we're not all supposed to be proficient in everything. And, I think that your story is just, again, it's a testament to, even with those challenges, like you said, you were able to, figure out a way through, make a way through and figure out and carve out first finishing school and then, carving out a career for yourself, in the corporate world. So moving into that, I noticed just from taking a look at your LinkedIn that you are in the DEI space as a job title, but also you have a company that does DEI, work. And based on your experience, how would you describe the state of corporate culture as it relates to equity, inclusion, and belonging today?
I think it depends on the organization and like in the industry. I feel like some places are further along than others. I feel like there was a major push. I mean, DEI has been around since the 60s, right? So there's always been this desire to understanding that diversity is important has been clear, but it's really been in the last 5 years that we're seeing inclusion needs to come before diversity. People really need to feel like they belong, or it's not going to work. I think there was a major push for all DEI stuff after George Floyd, which made sense, but there was a lot of commitment and black boxes and all these kind of performative actions, and companies had started to lay off about a little bit. But I think what's surprising them is they're now getting called out for that. Mm-hmm. And also there's a lot of groups that are coming together that are saying like, this is unacceptable. Like when I think of the disability community, there's been and I'm not sure if your audience knows this, but websites are considered a place. So if you're in the United States, your website has to be ADA compliant so that people with all different disabilities can use your website. And if it isn't, you can be sued because your website isn't compliant. So those lawsuits have been going through the roof, and they should be, because people are starting to call folks out more. So I think that in this society where people are a little less afraid of confrontation, and we have, the Zoomers who are, I love them. I think as in a generation, they're incredible, and they call stuff out the way that they see it. And they have demands from corporations to, it's while salary is really important, these elements of feeling like they belong, these having an actual work-life balance, like I think that we are moving towards a place that's going to look a little bit more European when it comes to work-life balance. But I think that when I take a look at global trends, we are ahead when it comes to the initiatives that are being taken with equity and inclusion is in the forefront.
Okay. And when you say look a little more European, you're speaking to like European countries that have just better work-life balance policies?
Yeah, and I shouldn't even say European, because I feel like it's almost everywhere besides the United States. I think that Canada and England both also have some issues when it comes to work-life balance, from just a little bit of research that I've been doing. But the American culture, that's like hustle culture, is dead. And I think that a lot of people are kind of moving away from that. So we see in other countries, it's like, taking a real PTO and not being at work while you're where you're supposed to be on vacation, and leaving when it's the end of the day, as opposed to continuing to work throughout the night just because you work remotely or you have a work computer. So I think that we're starting to see a shift on what people are saying, like this is acceptable and this isn't acceptable.
Absolutely. Okay. So one of the things, our company, Grow Dialogue, we're in the DEI space, we're in the corporate culture space. And, one of the things that's been frustrating for me is, having conversations with organizations and realizing that they aren't necessarily willing to do the deep work to really create systems for equity and inclusion. Beyond, like you said, some of the checking the box, efforts. And I want to know, have you experienced any of that in your work as a consultant and, just being an employee who does DEI work?
Yeah. So as a business owner, I don't take those clients anymore. I have turned down incredible deals because it was very clear to me that there's a huge issue with racism that they don't want to fix, or a huge issue with transphobia that they don't want to touch. And I'm not doing that in my own business. As an employee, when I do see some of those things happen, but I have to call organizations out for it, or what am I doing? So the approach is always, first, like trying to appeal to like the human centric, like this is problematic for these reasons, this is how it makes people feel, but that doesn't always work for some leaders. So you have to be like, I don't know how soon you're looking to get on the news, because if you don't think that your employees won't get onto social media, get onto TikTok, get onto Glassdoor and blast you, they will. And I also don't know how much you love being sued, but like people are doing, and they're not playing games. This isn't going to get any easier. So if you would like to stay out of the headlines, treat people right. So it should never really come to that point, but that is something that I have to let people know. I'll say, hey, I know that you don't want to work on this issue, but I also noticed that you had some employees on TikTok that shared that email that you sent over. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Well, it's out there. So what are you going to do?
Sure. Okay. So how do you feel about the fact that like corporations are like the battleground for what's happening? Let's say shining a light on just the inequities, the oppressions that exist in society. that it seems like, the corporate space is the area where that battle is being fought the most, is getting the most attention. How do you feel about that? Do you think that that's the right approach for those of us who are aware of these inequities in our world? Should corporations have to bear the brunt of all of this?
Yes and no. I think that it's really important that people are having the kind of conversations that they're having at work and have them at home. So whenever I do trainings focused on having difficult conversations, I always make sure to have those elements at home too, because it's not just your boss that's the issue, it's your uncle, it's your mom, it's like all these other people. So you need to be able to have these conversations at home as well. But I also recognize that for a lot of folks, we spend more time with our coworkers than we do with our own families, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on what your situation is. And it makes sense that there's a lot of focus on what equity looks like in those spaces. But I think that it isn't a DEI practitioner's job to make an organization be like a social justice running machine. I don't think that that really makes sense for every business model. But in order to keep people, I think that belonging really needs to be the center of things. I think that for ideally justice would be, but I don't think that most organizations can or have the bandwidth for it, but they can make sure that everyone feels like they belong. They can make sure that people have what they need to do their job well. Not that we're all best friends and it's kumbaya. It needs to be a place where folks can work. So I love that it's that they are that they are being called out or called in about this sort of thing. But I feel like I want to see some more of these conversations happening for folks outside of the workspace.
Okay. Yeah, I would say I agree. It's a two-pronged approach indeed. I've definitely been that person at Thanksgiving, like cringing, at the things that my family members say. And, I've been one to speak up at times and make them uncomfortable because I'm like, that's just not right. What you're saying is very offensive, quite frankly. And I know that takes courage, to speak up and speak out. But like you said, I think more and more of us are getting that courage. And I think that, by corporations investing in this work, it's helping their people. It's empowering their people and also potentially giving their people language to go out and have those conversations in their communities, their family community, their neighborhoods communities. And, I think that corporate America, it takes and takes, not even just America, let's say corporations globally, it takes so much from people in terms of effort and time and labor that, for them to invest back into people and back into communities by, bringing in practitioners like yourself, to empower and give people the skills and the language. I think that it's only right that they do so. So it's interesting for me to observe it. But at the same time, I realize how prevalent, like you said, work is in our lives, and that we spend so much time in those places and spaces. So hopefully it's disseminating across, out from the job into, into those family conversations, et cetera, like you said. You mentioned belonging being, like the most important thing. So what are some tips you could give, anyone listening to this who, works for a corporation? They may have a DEI role, they may not, but they're interested in understanding, some things they could do to foster more belonging in the workplace. Are there any quick tips you can share?
You have to know what belonging means to other people, because it looks different for different folks. So I know people are tired of surveys, but they do make a difference where we can get kind of a pulse on what people, how people feel about belonging, what they feel like they need to feel like they belong. So those conversations need to happen, and then they need to happen in other groups. So I really do like having a group of people that are in smaller circles where we're focused maybe on identity or teams, and we're asking them questions about belonging, where we can kind of have a like a round circle where folks can share their feelings around that, and then take some of those actions. I think one of the biggest mistakes that organizations make is that they start taking steps and making all these initiatives, and it's things that people don't necessarily want. Like one of the an example of this is folks that'll say, okay, well, it's Black History Month and we know that our Black employees want to do something, so let's get Keisha to share her thoughts about Black History Month next week. Is that what Keisha wants? Or did she say that it's weird that we haven't talked about Black History Month? Right. It doesn't. So like asking the questions of what's actually needed is really imperative to see like what belonging truly feels like and looks like.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And I would like to know, like, what is your vision for the future as it relates to corporate culture?
I mean, the North Star is that DEI is not even needed, really. Like, that's ideal. It's just that all this is just common sense and is simple, and everything is systematized. And, I'm somewhere running a tech company and on a boat. Like, that's what the ideal is. But there is so much work that needs to be done in the meantime. So I think more practically, it's companies having going beyond the basics. I no longer have conversations with people on why DEI is important. If we're still doing that, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not the practitioner for you. So the hope is that foundation is laid across industries, and the companies that don't, that they're continued to be called out about it. If you are just learning that diversity is going to help with innovation and people working better together, like that's news to you, you got some work to do, and that work needs to get done ahead of hiring somebody else, in my opinion.
Awesome. Thank you. So to close things out, the last question that I would like to ask is actually interesting because you're a storyteller, and we like to bring story into the themes that we're putting out this season. So are you able to share a story that has inspired you and or your work?
A story that has inspired me or my work? Yes. So this is national news, but it's family news as well. My brother, this is some years ago now, he was a veteran with PTSD that moved to California to take care of his friend who was paralyzed from the chest down due to an IED. So he went there to take care of him. And one day when he was walking home from a grocery store, there was two men with guns, there was two men that were, I don't know what they were doing. They're getting some kind of altercation with my brother. They just came out of a place that they were robbing. Like, it was just a mess. And my brother shot out 2 warning shots at them. And then when they kept coming at him, he defended himself. Nobody died. But my brother, when he was arrested, was looking at $2 million for the bail amount. And again, nobody died. Those 2 guys went on to commit crimes very soon after that. Wow. He was also put in, while he was in jail waiting for his trial, which took 3 years, he spent 16 months in solitary confinement. And they never were able to give a reason as to why. So during that time, there was a huge shift in my family on like what our priorities really were, and working to support veterans is really important to me, and working to fight against solitary confinement is important to me. But bringing up, like, you don't always think that things like this will happen. Like, you don't know what's going to happen in your own family. Like, you assume that it wouldn't. You come from a good family, and yes, I know this is a problem in the Black community, but my family's so affluent and we're so recognized in the community and all these different things. It does not matter. Mm-hmm. And as somebody who had to go to work every day knowing this and feeling like I had to keep things to myself because of the judgment that would happen if other people knew it, I don't want anyone to ever feel that way. My goal is to make sure that people don't feel like they have to wear a mask, whether they're using AAVE at work, whether they have to walk with a cane at work, whether they feel like they need to pivot and just saying who they are. Nobody should have to do that. And so I felt like I had to keep so much to my chest because my place of work wasn't going to be thoughtful in the way that they reacted with it. So it's important to me to kind of do my work to see that that shifts for other people and also bring justice to the situation that my brother had gone through so that nobody else has to.
Wow. What a powerful story. And it just brings up in just another way that, you know, suffering takes place in our society. Mm-hmm. People suffer in a lot of unfair ways, and you know, I hate knowing that. Wow. So thank you for sharing that story, and you know, sending lots of love and light to your family as you know, and your brother. You know, because I know that there's a lot. You know, just the trauma. You know, he already had the PTSD from serving, and now I can imagine the PTSD that came from that experience. So, thank you for sharing that, and I'm hoping that your work and by shedding light on this and others who are working in this area will again relieve that for others in the future, so they don't have to experience that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So I appreciate this time, you know, that we've had together. I appreciate you, you know, sharing your story with our listeners and shedding some light on some of the challenges as a DEI practitioner that you faced, as well as some of the solutions and how you're kind of navigating this time and space, you know, as we're out here doing this work and trying to make, you know, the workplace as well as our families and communities more equitable and inclusive so that everyone feels like they belong, you know, and that we don't have to wear a mask and, you know, we can show up as our most authentic selves in every context. So just thank you for the work that you continue to do. So important, you know, so I'm glad that you're out there doing this work as well. And is there any way that you would like to share with our listeners that they can follow you and your work?
Yeah, you can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm Noelle C. Johnson on LinkedIn, and you can also follow me on TikTok. I'm at Your DEI Trainer on TikTok. Awesome.
We'll be sure to add that to the show notes, and I hope that you you know, continue to make a positive impact in the world in the ways that you've already been doing. So for all of the listeners, we appreciate you so much for continuing to go on this journey with us and listening to the Grow Dialogue podcast. And until next time, I love y'all. Peace.
Thanks for tuning in to the Grow Dialogue podcast. Remember to join our Grow Dialogue community to continue the conversation, activate authentic dialogue, and to get exclusive content, discounts, and special offers on curated artwork and music from independent artists from the Americas. Check out our show notes for more info and visit www.growdialogue.com to join our live events. Don't forget to support us on Patreon. We really appreciate your support.